Driven to Win presents Anne of the Island by Ellen Montgomery, chapters 35 and 36. As Anne's world shifts with unexpected news and quiet heartbreak, she begins to see life and love with new eyes. Let's begin. Chapter 35. The last Redmond year opens. Here we are, all back again, nosely sunburned and rejoicing as a strong man to run a race, said Phil, sitting down on a suitcase with a sigh of pleasure. Isn't it jolly to see this dear old Patty's Place again and the cats? Rusty has lost another piece of ear, hasn't he? Rusty would be the nicest cat in the world if he had no ears at all, declared Anne loyally from her trunk while Rusty writhed about her lap in a frenzy of welcome. Aren't you glad to see us back, Auntie? Demanded Phil. Double quotes. Yes, but I wish you'd tidy things up, said Aunt Jamesina plaintively, looking at the wilderness of trunks and suitcases by which the four laughing, chattering girls were surrounded. You can talk just as well later on. Work first and then play used to be my motto when I was a girl. Oh, we've just reversed that in this generation, Auntie. Our motto is play your play and then dig in. You can do your work so much better if you've had a good bout of play. First. If you are going to marry a minister, said Aunt Jamesina, picking up Joseph and her knitting and resigning herself to the inevitable with the charming grace that made her the queen of house mothers, you will have to give up such expressions as dig in. Why? Moaned Phil. Oh, why must a minister's wife be supposed to utter only prunes and prisms? I shan't. Everybody on Patterson Street uses slang, that is to say, metaphorical language, and if I didn't they would think me insufferably proud. And stuck up. Have you broken the news to your family? Asked Priscilla, feeding the Sarah-cat bits from her lunch basket. Phil nodded. Double quotes. How did they take it? Oh, Mother rampaged. But I stood rock firm, even I, Philippa Gordon, who never before could hold fast to anything. Father was calmer. Father's own daddy was a minister, so you see he has a soft spot in his heart for the cloth. I had Joe up to Mount Holly after Mother grew calm, and they both loved him. But Mother gave him some frightful hints in every conversation regarding what she had hoped for me. Oh, my vacation pathway hasn't been exactly strewn with roses, girls dear. But I've won out and I've got Joe. Nothing else matters. 2. You, said Aunt Jamesina darkly. Nor to Joe either, retorted Phil. You keep on pitying him. Why, pray? I think he's to be envied. He's getting brains, beauty, and a heart of gold in me. It's well we know how to take your speeches, said Aunt Jamesina patiently. I hope you don't talk like that before strangers. What would they think? Oh, I don't want to know what they think. I don't want to see myself as others see me. I'm sure it would be horribly uncomfortable most of the time. I don't believe Burns was really sincere in that prayer either. Oh, I dare say we all pray for some things that we really don't want if we were only honest enough to look into our hearts, owned Aunt Jamesina candidly. I've a notion that such prayers don't rise very far. I used to pray that. I might be enabled to forgive a certain person, but I know now I really didn't want to forgive her. When I finally got that I did want to, I forgave her without having to pray about it. I can't picture you as being unforgiving for long, said Stella. Oh, I used to be. But holding spite doesn't seem worthwhile when you get along in years. That reminds me, said Anne, and told the tale of John and Janet. And now tell us about that romantic scene you hinted so darkly at in one of your letters, demanded Phil. Anne acted out Samuel's proposal with great spirit. The girls shrieked with laughter, and Aunt Jamesina smiled. It isn't in good taste to make fun of your beaux, she said severely. But, she added calmly, I always did it myself. Tell us about your beaux, Auntie, entreated Phil. You must have had any number of them. They're not in the past tense, retorted Aunt Jamesina. I've got them yet. There are 3 old widowers at home who have been casting sheep's eyes at me for some time. You children needn't think you own all the romance in the world. Widowers and sheep's eyes don't sound very romantic, Auntie. Well, no, but young folks aren't always romantic either. Some of my beaux certainly weren't. I used to laugh at them scandalous poor boys. There was Jim Elwood. He was always in a sort of daydream, never seemed to sense what was going on. He didn't wake up to the fact that I'd said no till a year after I'd said it. When he did get married, his wife fell out of the sleigh one night when they were driving home from church, and he never missed her. Then there was Dan Winston. He knew too much. He knew everything in this world and most of what is in the next. He could give you an answer to any question, even if you asked him when the judgment day was to be. Milton Edwards was real nice and I liked him, but I didn't marry him. For one thing, he took a week to get a joke through his head, and for another, he never asked me. Horatio Reeve was the most interesting beau I ever had. But when he told a story, he dressed it up so that you couldn't see it for frills. I never could decide whether he was lying or just letting his imagination run loose. And what about the others, Auntie? Go away and unpack, said Aunt Jamesina, waving Joseph at them by mistake for a needle. The others were too nice to make fun of. I shall respect their memory. There's a box of flowers in your room, Anne. They came about an hour ago. After the first week, the girls of Patty's Place settled down to a steady grind of study. For this was their last year at Redmond, and graduation honors must be fought for persistently. And devoted herself to English, Priscilla pored over classics, and Philippa pounded away at mathematics. Sometimes they grew tired, sometimes they felt discouraged, sometimes nothing seemed worth the struggle for it. In one such mood, Stella wandered up to the Blue Room one rainy November evening, and sat on the floor in a little circle of light cast by the lamp beside her, amid a surrounding snow of crumpled manuscript. "What in the world are you doing?" "Just looking over some old story club yarns. I wanted something to cheer and inebriate. I'd studied until the world seemed azure, so I came up here and dug these out of my trunk. They are so drenched in tears and tragedy that they are excruciatingly funny. I'm blue and discouraged myself," said Stella, throwing herself on the couch. "Nothing seems worthwhile. My very thoughts are old. I've thought them all before. What is the use of living after all, Anne?" "Honey, it's just brain fag that makes us feel that way, and the weather. A pouring rainy night like this, coming after a hard day's grind, would squelch anyone but a Mark Tapley. You know it is worthwhile to live." "Oh, I suppose so. But I can't prove it to myself just now. Just think of all the great and noble souls who have lived and worked in the world," said Anne dreamily. "Isn't it worthwhile to come after them and inherit what they won and taught? Isn't it worthwhile to think we can share their inspiration? And then all the great souls that will come in the future? Isn't it worthwhile to work a little and prepare the way for them, make just one step in their path easier?" "Oh, my mind agrees with you, Anne, but my soul remains doleful and uninspired. I'm always grubby and dingy on rainy nights. Some nights I like the rain. I like to lie in bed and hear it pattering on the roof and drifting through the pines. I like it when it stays on the roof," said Stella. "It doesn't always. I spent a gruesome night in an old country farmhouse last summer. The roof leaked, and the rain came pattering down on my bed. There was no poetry in that. I had to get up in the murk midnight and chivvy round to pull the bedstead out of the drip, and it was one of those solid, old-fashioned beds that weigh a ton more or less. And then that drip drop kept up all night until my nerves just went to pieces. You've no idea what an eerie noise a great drop of rain falling with a mushy thud on a bare floor makes in the night. It sounds like ghostly footsteps and all that sort of thing. What are you laughing over, Anne? These stories, as Phil would say, they are killing in more senses than one, for everybody died in them. What dazzlingly lovely heroines we had, and how we dressed them. Silk, satins, velvets, jewels, laces, they never wore anything else. Here's one of Jane Andrews' stories, depicting her heroine as sleeping in a beautiful white satin nightdress trimmed with seed pearls." "Go on," said Stella. "I begin to feel that life is worth living as long as there's a laugh in it. Here's one I wrote. My heroine is disporting herself at a ball, glittering from head to foot with large diamonds of the first water, but what booted beauty or rich attire? The paths of glory lead but to the grave. They must either be murdered or die of a broken heart. There was no escape for them. Let me read some of your stories. Well, here's my masterpiece. Note its cheerful title, My Graves. I shed quarts of tears while writing it, and the other girls shed gallons while I read it. Jane Andrews' mother scolded her frightfully because she had so many handkerchiefs in the wash that week. It's a harrowing tale of the wanderings of a Methodist minister's wife. I made her a Methodist because it was necessary that she should wander. She buried a child every place she lived in. There were 9 of them, and their graves were severed far apart, ranging from Newfoundland to Vancouver. I described the children, pictured their several deathbeds, and detailed their tombstones and epitaphs. I had intended to bury the whole 9, but when I had disposed of 8, my invention of horrors gave out, and I permitted the 9th to live as a hopeless cripple. While Stella read my graves, punctuating its tragic paragraphs with chuckles, and Rusty slept the sleep of a just cat who has been out all night curled up on a Jane Andrews' tale of a beautiful maiden of 15 who went to nurse in a leper colony of course dying of the loathsome disease finally. Anne glanced over the other manuscripts and recalled the old days at Avonlea School when the members of the Story Club, sitting under the spruce trees or down among the ferns by the brook, had written them. What fun they had had! How the sunshine and mirth of those olden summers returned as she read. Not all the glory that was Greece or the grandeur that was Rome could weave such wizardry as those funny, tearful tales of the Story Club. Among the manuscripts Anne found one written on sheets of wrapping paper. A wave of laughter filled her gray eyes as she recalled the time and place of its genesis. It was the sketch she had written the day she fell through the roof of the Cobb Duck House on the Tory Road, and glanced over it, then fell to reading it intently. It was a little dialogue between asters and sweet peas, wild canaries in the lilac bush, and the guardian spirit of the garden. After she had read it, she sat, staring into space. And when Stella had gone, she smoothed out the crumpled manuscript. "I believe I will," she said resolutely. Chapter 36. The Gardener's Skull. "Here is a letter with an Indian stamp for you." "Aunt Jimsy," said Phil, "here are 3 for Stella and 2 for Price, and a glorious fat one for me from Joe. There's nothing for you, Anne, except a circular." Nobody noticed Anne's flush as she took the thin letter Phil tossed her carelessly. But a few minutes later, Phil looked up to see a transfigured Anne. "Honey, what good thing has happened?" "The youth's friend has accepted a little sketch I sent them a fortnight ago," said Anne, trying hard to speak as if she were accustomed to having sketches accepted every mail, but not quite succeeding. "And Shirley, how glorious!" "What was it? When is it to be published? Did they pay you for it?" "Yes. They've sent a check for $10, and the editor writes that he would like to see more of my work. Dear man, he shall. It was an old sketch I found in my box. I rewrote it and sent it in, but I never really thought it could be accepted." "Because it had no plot," said Anne, recalling the bitter experience of Averil's atonement. "What are you going to do with that $10, Anne?" "Let's all go uptown and get drunk," suggested Phil. "I am going to squander it in a wild, soulless revel of some sort," declared Anne gaily. "At all events, it isn't tainted money like the check I got for that horrible reliable baking powder story. I spent it usefully for clothes and hated them every time I put them on." "Think of having a real live author at Patty's Place," said Priscilla. "It's a great responsibility," said Aunt Jamesina solemnly. "Indeed it is," agreed Price with equal solemnity. "Authors are kittle cattle. You never know when or how they will break out, and they make copy of us." "I meant that the ability to write for the press was a great responsibility," said Aunt Jamesina severely, "and I hope Anne realizes it. My daughter used to write stories before she went to the foreign field, but now she has turned her attention to higher things. She used to say her motto was, 'Never write a line you would be ashamed to read at your own funeral.' You'd better take that for yours, Anne, if you're going to embark in literature. Though, to be sure," added Aunt Jamesina perplexedly, "Elizabeth always used to laugh when she said it. She always laughed so much that I don't know how she ever came to decide on being a missionary. I'm thankful she did. I prayed that she might, but I wish she hadn't." Then Aunt Jamesina wondered why those giddy girls all laughed. Anne's eyes shone all that day. Literary ambitions sprouted and budded in her brain. Their exhilaration accompanied her to Jenny Cooper's walking party, and not even the sight of Gilbert and Christine walking just ahead of her and Roy could quite subdue the sparkle of her starry hopes. Nevertheless, she was not so rapt from things of earth as to be unable to notice that Christine's walk was decidedly ungraceful. But I suppose Gilbert looks only at her face. So like a man, thought Anne scornfully. Shall you be home? Saturday afternoon? Asked Roy. Yes. My mother and sisters are coming to call on you, said Roy quietly. Something went over Anne which might be described as a thrill, but it was hardly a pleasant one. She had never met any of Roy's family. She realized the significance of his statement, and it had somehow an irrevocableness about it that chilled her. I shall be glad to see them, she said flatly, and then wondered if she really would be glad. She ought to be, of course. But would it not be something of an ordeal? Gossip had filtered to Anne regarding the light in which the Gardners viewed the infatuation of son and brother. Roy must have brought pressure to bear in the matter of this call, and knew she would be weighed in the balance. From the fact that they had consented to call, she understood that, willingly or unwillingly, they regarded her as a possible member of their clan. I shall just be myself. I shall not try to make a good impression, thought Anne loftily. But she was wondering what dress she would better wear Saturday afternoon, and if the new style of high hair dressing would suit her better than the old. And the walking party was rather spoiled for her. By night she had decided that she would wear her brown chiffon on Saturday, but would do her hair low. Friday afternoon. None of the girls had classes at Redmond. Stella took the opportunity to write a paper for the Philomathic Society, and was sitting at the table in the corner of the living room with an untidy litter of notes and manuscript on the floor around her. Stella always vowed she never could write anything unless she threw each sheet down as she completed it. And, in her flannel blouse and serge skirt, with her hair rather blown from her windy walk home, was sitting squarely in the middle of the floor, teasing the sarah-cat with a wishbone. Joseph and Rusty were both curled up in her lap. A warm, plummy odor filled the whole house, for Priscilla was cooking in the kitchen. Presently she came in, enshrouded in a huge work apron, with a smudge of flour on her nose, to show Aunt Jamesina the chocolate cake she had just iced. At this auspicious moment the knocker sounded. Nobody paid any attention to it save Phil, who sprang up and opened it, expecting a boy with the hat she had bought that morning. On the doorstep stood Mrs. Gardner and her daughters, and scrambled to her feet somehow, emptying 2 indignant cats out of her lap as she did so, and mechanically shifting her wishbone from her right hand to her left. Priscilla, who would have had to cross the room to reach the kitchen door, lost her head, wildly plunged the chocolate cake under a cushion on the Inglemook sofa, and dashed upstairs. Stella began feverishly gathering up her manuscript. Only Aunt Jamesina and Phil remained normal. Thanks to them, everybody was soon sitting at ease, and Priscilla came down, apronless and smudgeless. Stella reduced her corner to decency, and Phil saved the situation by a stream of ready small talk. Mrs. Gardner was tall and thin and handsome, exquisitely gowned, cordial with a cordiality that seemed a trifle forced. Elaine Gardner was a younger edition of her mother, lacking the cordiality. She endeavored to be nice, but succeeded only in being haughty and patronizing. Dorothy Gardner was slim and jolly and rather tomboyish, and knew she was Roy's favorite sister and warmed to her. She would have looked very much like Roy if she had had dreamy dark eyes instead of roguish hazel ones. Thanks to her and Phil, the call really went off very well, except for a slight sense of strain in the atmosphere and 2 rather untoward incidents. Rusty and Joseph, left to themselves, began a game of chase, and sprang madly into Mrs. Gardner's silken lap and out of it in their wild career. Mrs. Gardner lifted her lorgnette and gazed after their flying forms as if she had never seen cats before, and Anne, choking back slightly nervous laughter, apologized as best she could. "You are fond of cats?" said Mrs. Gardner, with a slight intonation of tolerant wonder. Anne, despite her affection for Rusty, was not especially fond of cats, but Mrs. Gardner's tone annoyed her. Inconsequently, she remembered that Mrs. John Blythe was so fond of cats that she kept as many as her husband would allow. "They are adorable animals, aren't they?" she said wickedly. "I have never liked cats. said Mrs. Gardner remotely. I love them, said Dorothy. They are so nice and selfish. Dogs are too good and unselfish. They make me feel uncomfortable. But cats are gloriously human. You have two delightful old china dogs there. May I look at them closely? Said Aline, crossing the room towards the fireplace and thereby becoming the unconscious cause of the other accident. Picking up Magog, she sat down on the cushion, under which was secreted Priscilla's chocolate cake. Priscilla and Anne exchanged agonized glances but could do nothing. The stately Aline continued to sit on the cushion and discuss china dogs until the time of departure. Dorothy lingered behind a moment to squeeze Anne's hand and whisper impulsively, I know you and I are going to be chums. Oh, Roy has told me all about you. I'm the only one of the family he tells things to. Poor boy, nobody could confide in Mama and Aline, you know. What glorious times you girls must have here. Won't you let me come often and have a share in them? Come as often as you like, Anne responded heartily, thankful that one of Roy's sisters was likable. She would never like Aline, so much was certain, and Aline would never like her, though Mrs. Gardner might be won altogether, and sighed with relief when the ordeal was over. Of all sad words of tongue or pen the saddest, or it might have been, quoted Priscilla, tragically lifting the cushion. This cake is now what you might call a flat failure, and the cushion is likewise ruined. Never tell me that Friday isn't unlucky. People who send word they are coming on Saturday shouldn't come on Friday, said Aunt Jamesina. I fancy it was Roy's mistake, said Phil. That boy isn't really responsible for what he says when he talks to Anne. Where is Anne? And had gone upstairs. She felt oddly like crying, but she made herself laugh instead. Rusty and Joseph had been too awful, and Dorothy was a dear. And that brings chapter 36 to a close. With every change, Anne is learning that even heartache can lead us home. Subscribe now and join us tomorrow for the next chapters only on Driven to Win.